Chapter 16. Like Father, Like Son. The swords clanked against each other. Their steel sound echoed in the large room. The skill of attack and defense was the object of this sport. Both opponents circled each other, wearing proper fencing gear. The swords hit until one of the fencers poked the tip of his sword against the padded shirt of the other. Straightway the winner took his helmet off. "Ha! I have finally beat you," Klingman cheered, still holding the sword against his opponent. "Oh no." Felix took his fencing helmet off, dramatically going to the ground as if death were succumbing him. Klingman laughed, then in sportsmanship helped Felix back up. "I'm so glad you have come back to London." "As am I. I felt as if I'd not seen Ignaz and Charlotte in so long." Felix felt much happier being among his London friends. The season this time fared much better, as the smog had lifted, making the city more visible within. The rooms where Felix resided were the same he had before, giving all the more feeling of comfort. Though he made friends, old and new in Paris, he felt more at home in London. Klingman told him, "We shall have to go to the concert hall. The orchestra is doing a rehearsal of Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony. I believe they miss you quite so." He began putting away his fencing gear. Felix followed, and they both left the gym. As they entered the lobby of the concert hall, the fragrant sounds of the countryside echoed down the hall, reminding Felix of Switzerland. Klingman headed for the auditorium as Felix went up the staircase to sit in a box. It was nice to see the orchestra rehearsing from above. He spotted many fragments among the musicians. After the piece reached its final, Felix headed to the ground floor of the auditorium. When hardly making it down the aisle towards the stage, a member of the orchestra shouted, "There is Mendelssohn." "Welcome to him," the other members gave their excited uproars. Felix went to greet them, feeling happy that the musicians loved and missed him. Music-wise, Felix and Moscheles had various concerts underway. For Felix, his newest compositions were met with great success. The Hebrides Overture and the G minor piano concerto became ragingly popular. Among aspiring keyboardists, Felix's concerto became common for ones making their debuts. Felix attended a concert to hear a 17-year-old by the name of William Sterndale Bennett play the work. The young man played with such ease at even the most challenging of passages. Felix was so impressed with Mr. Bennett's skill, he inquired to contact him. He found Bennett after the concert, and the young man was enthusiastic. Felix told him, "I hope we keep in touch. If you are willing, I'd like to take you on as my pupil." "Yes, I would very much like that. I shall give you my information before I leave London." "Thank you so." Bennett jumped in joy. Felix left him at that and continued with his own business. He still had much to do with concerts and composing. The Scottish symphony was not yet complete, and he still could not make a firm decision on the Italian symphony. He revised it much. Fanny sent her suggestions, as he often begged for her opinion. Felix's time in London was going smooth and ever better than the woes and struggles in Paris. But a letter from his father changed that. Abraham informed Felix that Professor Zelter had become dangerously ill. Felix gave way to much worry over the information. Zelter was old and past his prime. In all hope, Zelter would recover, and Felix would greet him upon his return to Berlin. Yet the recent death of Goethe did not lift Felix's spirits. Felix worried about the Sing Academy as well. Without Zelter, there would be no one to watch over the precious collection of Bach's music. The collection, if Zelter couldn't return to the Academy, would be dispersed. Felix wrote to Abraham, telling him to do what he could to prevent anything from getting tossed away. He wanted to see the collection before any such thing was decided upon. Felix also pleaded to his father that he help Zelter in any way by means of watching over the Academy. It was obvious that Zelter would be retiring, and Felix intended to speak with him on the matter. He wanted to take over his position. Zelter at the moment may not have been thinking of handing his job on, but Felix had good standing with the Academy to acquire it. Over the course of a few days, Abraham's letters described the decline in Zelter's health. Felix decided he needed to leave London if he wanted a chance to talk to his old professor. There was still business in London, so he deemed that in a fortnight he'd make his return to Berlin. Abraham was not enthused with Felix's intention to obtain the Academy position. It seemed better for someone in advanced years, not a young, aspiring man. It was also the fact that the salary was small. By any means, Abraham wanted his son home, as Felix had been abroad for over 2 years now. He wanted to discuss in person a better decision on his future. In his last few days in London, Felix calmed his anxiety by spending time with friends, rehearsing for concerts and composing. On days off, he walked through the gardens near his residence to smell the lilacs. To keep his mother worry-free of his health, he often performed gymnastics to keep his strength up. There was much space in the gardens to stretch and roll about. The steamer departed the London dock in the night. Felix laid in the cabin's hammock with an aching stomach. This time it was not seasickness, nor illness. It was the fear of returning to a changed home. Berlin would be a different place, and he did not know what to make of it. It was only days prior that he received the news of the death of his beloved Professor Zelter. The information gave a sickness of its own. In other aspects, Felix would get to meet new members of the family, such as his nephew Sebastian and Rebecca's husband. She had recently wedded to the mathematician Peter Gustav Lejeune Dirichlet. It was unknown what mood Abraham would be in over the fact that his younger sibling married before he. After passing through Hamburg and trudging the next 36 hours by carriage, Felix arrived on Leipziger Strasse in Berlin. A calm feeling was felt in the darkened evening. The estate looked the same. Candles were glowing through a window or so. His family was waiting for him. When opening the front door, the entryway was dark and quiet. He hung his coat and hat on the rack, then proceeded to the parlor, where the fireplace was providing a dim spark. To his relief, Abraham was in his chair, reading his book, and Leah was peacefully knitting on the couch. Felix stood in the doorway a while, watching them in their peaceful state. He took in that small yet precious moment. Leah finally looked up to see her son, who she had not seen in 2 years' time. Her gazing expression caused Abraham to look up from his book. As Felix walked in, Leah set her needlework down, as if she did not know what to make of the sight before her. Finally her senses came to, and she dashed to him. She gave the tightest hug he'd ever had. His heart filled with the utmost content, but after a bit admitted, "You're crushing me." She let go and replaced the hug with motherly kisses. Abraham came, giving an embrace. He seemed happy to have Felix home, unlike last time. Paul came down the stairs and cheered at the sight of Felix. Felix's eyes gave to shock at how much Paul had grown. He was now 18, going to college and making a career in banking with Abraham. Leah informed Felix, "Fanny and Rebecca are coming tomorrow with their families." "Good, I missed them ever so." Felix gave a sigh of relief. It felt so strange that the only other child left in the main house besides Felix was Paul. Abraham had much on his mind concerning Felix, as Rebecca, being younger, had already found settlement. Paul was deemed in good standing. Felix didn't take note of such things. He wanted to enjoy being back with his family. The next day Felix strolled around the gardens with Fanny to catch up. She brought along her son, Sebastian, for Felix to finally meet. The little boy was able to walk and speak a few words. Felix held him as they admired the blooming flowers. Fanny had joy at heart at seeing Sebastian with his uncle. Felix told Fanny all about his adventures abroad and the memories he gained. Fanny was intrigued by each story, but Felix began to feel as if he were talking of a distant dream. He knew the past events took place, but it seemed to have gone by in the snap of the fingers. In turn, Fanny spoke of her life. Music still took up her time as she organized the Sunday salons and composed new pieces each week. Her ideas were flourishing. She seemed eager to ask Felix something, but held back as if she were unsure of the subject. Felix listened patiently in hopes to hear her question. As she finally felt willed to ask, she began, "Felix, I know this may be an old subject, and you may agree or disagree. I'm not sure your feelings of it since you've traveled and seen so much. I was wondering—" "Felix," Wilhelm interrupted as they happened to near the guest house. Felix set Sebastian down and ran to greet him. As they spoke, Fanny caught up beside her husband, holding Sebastian. Felix watched as the family stood together, looking ever so happy. It gave an inner sense of joy to see his sister's family. Later that day, Felix went to the stable to see his horse. The equine expressed excitement at seeing him. It whinnied and nestled at him. Felix smiled. "Did you miss me? I missed you." He gave the horse a few apples, then saddled it up. Paul had made sure the horse got regular exercise, but it seemed quite restless as Felix sat on it. It pranced out of the stall, then buckled slightly with energy when entering the gardens. "Whoa!" Felix used the reins to control the horse as it frolicked and jumped. At times it bolted about. Felix muttered to the horse. "You do know a person is riding." The horse grumbled a bit and continued skipping about. A few paces away, Felix spotted Rebecca and her husband, Peter, walking the gardens. Peter was quite intrigued as Felix trotted the horse towards them and hopped off with much grace. Rebecca introduced her husband, and Felix gave a shake of the hand. He couldn't help but notice how happy the couple seemed together. In the estate, in his office, Abraham sat in his chair, gazing out the window. He watched Felix speaking with Rebecca and Peter. The scene sent him into deep thought on a subject: marriage. Felix's carefree spirit often remained in his own little world of music, travel, and art, too often for Abraham's ideals. In his mind, Felix needed to find love towards a decent young woman, to make a well-maintained family. The trouble lay in the fact that Felix seemed uninterested in serious love. It was true he had affection for Betty Pister, but that attachment rendered severed with Betty marrying off. Since then, the young love-tyrant had a stubbornness to find a woman. If Felix wasn't going to find a lady for himself, Abraham had plans of his own. "Honey," Leah called by the doorway. Abraham jumped in his doze. "Yeah?" "I was just checking on you. You seem so lost in thought." "Oh, I'm just admiring the garden outside," he excused. Leah glanced out the window and noticed her children outside. She knew what was on her husband's mind and assured, "Felix will find a wife some day. Give him time. But he's nearing 24 and has been abroad. He should be settling. I know he won't be given the position at the academy as he wishes. I've heard rumors that the committee choosing has their prejudices. There are plenty of other positions out there. With his skill, he should end up fine. Don't worry so much. If you push him into something too quickly, he could fare unhappy in the long run." Leah embraced Abraham. Abraham gave a sigh while still gazing out the window at Felix. Days soon turned into weeks since Felix's arrival home. Life in Berlin was slow and calm. Felix made sure to be among the first to send applications for the Sing Academy position. It was now nothing but a waiting game. There were quite a few fighting for the job. He decided to still enroll, though he did not yet know the terms. If the attempt failed, there was still much to do with publishing proposals for his compositions. When visiting the academy for rehearsals, Felix felt pangs of sadness when entering. There was a sickening emptiness. Rietz nor Zelter were there. He felt the dreadful gaps of those who had made the academy so bright. A director filling in Zelter's place didn't lift Felix's spirits any bit. His friend de Vriant still attended, helping him cope enough to make rehearsals bearable. Later that evening, the entire Mendelssohn family dined together at the main house. A nice meal of pheasant was prepared. It felt refreshing to eat, with much conversation commencing. Felix found it entertaining to watch Fanny scold her child for not eating the vegetables. Sebastian only wanted dessert. Wilhelm sketched on a small leaf of paper. Paul sat next to Abraham, and they were discussing banking. Leah spoke with Rebecca and Peter. Felix had a manuscript penning some music. As he wrote and ate dinner, he unconsciously began chewing at the table napkin. His mouth still felt the reminiscing need to be soothed. Abraham glanced at Felix as the cloth frayed. "Stop chewing on that. It's disgusting. You're ruining the napkin." "Sorry," Felix set it aside, feeling embarrassment as everyone had confusion over this odd habit. Leah continued a different conversation by asking Wilhelm, "Hansel, would you be willing to sketch Paul?" "Yeah." Wilhelm grabbed his sketchbook. Leah instructed, "Be sure it's a side profile. It suits him better." "Mutter." Paul felt embarrassed at her comment. Wilhelm was sitting on his side of the table, so began a side sketch. It turned out quite flattering. Abraham then informed Felix, "I forgot to mention that your friend, Herr Marx, is applying for the position of music at the Universität. Good for him. I shall send a letter recommending him. I'd like to see him get the job." Felix grabbed some letter paper. As dessert was served, which was lemon curd and biscuits, Fanny mentioned, "This Sunday should be quite a big salon since we skipped out on the last few. Vater, I did invite all that you suggested." "Good. I figured there would be many who had not heard Felix in a while would want to come." "Felix, have you much new material to play?" Abraham asked. Felix looked up from his letter. "Ja, Papa." "Wunderbar. Be sure to dress your best." "I will." Felix nodded. For the remainder of the week, Felix organized a list for Sunday. He had plenty of new material, such as his concerto and Lieder ohne Worte. There were always the old classics as well, such as Bach, Beethoven, and Mozart. In other means, Felix became rather lazy and concerned with searching for a job. He kept waiting on the academy position, but no word came of anything. To compensate, Felix continued composing and sending things to the publishers, so Abraham wouldn't think him a complete oaf. When Sunday came, Felix felt his heart ache as he dressed for the afternoon's occasion. The salons wouldn't be the same without Reitz or Zelter attending. It felt near pointless to participate, as it would only bring somberness. A light knock on the door caused him to finish tying his fine black silk English cravat. Leah peeked in, then smiled while walking in. "My child, you look so mature." "Danke, Mutter." Felix gave a rather fake smile. It didn't fool Leah one bit. She gave a motherly hug. "Whatever is the matter?" "I miss Reitz and Zelter." Sniffles escaped Felix's nose. Leah comforted him a while, then suggested, "We should be getting downstairs. There are quite a few guests already here. They are excited to see you." "All right." Felix followed Leah out of the room. As they reached the stairs, the chatter of guests echoed through the halls. Once they entered the music room, many people greeted them. Felix turned about, surrounded by unfamiliar faces. He spotted a few close friends here and there, but most rendered unrecognized. One thing was for certain. Many young ladies had been invited in company with their parents. When the hour struck, everyone took their seats as Fanny went to the piano. She spoke a short speech, then went right into playing. Felix felt his breath taken, as he had not heard his sister at the keys in so long. Her sound had matured more than ever. Wilhelm sat off to the side, sketching whilst listening to his wife. The music gave him much muse. Paul then took a cello and set up to play. He had still been taking lessons in spare time. It was a joy to watch him brush the bow across the strings, showing such passion for the instrument. Bach's cello preludes hummed into everyone's ears. After Paul finished, Fanny returned to the keys to accompany Rebecca's voice in some freshly composed lieder. Rebecca sang like the blossoming roses, but her tone indicated that she still loathed in the attention. Last but not least, it was Felix's turn. When standing, the young ladies among the spectators gave way to excited whispers, waving their fans in a blush. Felix hoped their attendance wasn't his father's doing, but deep inside, he knew the truth. In ignoring his inner conclusions, Felix sat down at the piano, giving the audience a glance. They stared at him intently. He was not one to have stage fright, but for some reason their gazes affected his conscience. It made him understand how Chopin felt when giving a concert. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Abraham gave his son a stern nod. Felix turned to the keys and began playing his lieder ohne Worte. The room filled with the soothing sounds of written music along with improvisations here and there, to give a unique performance. Felix closed his eyes, pretending to be in Paris at the Pleyel rooms. His added impromptu phrases had taken inspiration from Chopin, which intrigued the audience all the more. After many selected songs without words, he completed his part in the salon with a piano rendition of his concerto. The last movement made for quite a workout. By the time he stood from the keys, he was sweating. Everyone clapped, then dispersed their seats. Felix headed for the door as he wanted to get some rest, but Abraham called, "Felix, come here." Felix obeyed with a sigh. His father was speaking with the parents of a lady. By discreetly grabbing the back of his arm, Abraham pulled his son into conversation. Knowing the intentions, Felix hastened in speech, doing nothing more than speak politely to each girl and parent. Days after the salon, Felix made no social progress with any particular lady, so Abraham decided to further matters himself. He picked up a letter he had received. It contained a few requests. Taking a quill, he began writing a reply. At the 14th hour that afternoon, Abraham summoned Felix to the parlor for a chat. The maid set a tray of tea before them. A serious conversation. Felix settled with a cuppa, while Abraham opened the letter of invitation. "Herr and Frau Sommer invited you to their home to stay the night. They enjoyed your music last Sunday, and wish you over for dinner tonight." How nice, Felix thought of it. The Sommers had a large estate, larger than the Mendelssohn home. It sounded like an undeclinable invite, but Felix knew the underlying plot. They had a daughter named Lorianne. Her family had a lot of money and high status, giving many young men interest, until they met her. Felix heard from friends that she was the most overbearing girl they had met. He didn't think he could handle a stay, giving his honest opinion to his father. "I don't want to go." "You are. It would be rude to decline from the summers. You need to branch out. Your younger sister is already married. Paul, with his good standing, should be wedded in ease. It's time you found someone." "I'm not interested in looking for love," Felix stated. Abraham strengthened his stern tone. "You are going, and I'm not letting you out of it. Now go pack. I've already written an accepting reply." "Father," Felix groaned as he nearly threw the teacup down. "Get upstairs and pack for one night. Now." His father's sharp tone forced Felix from his seat. He silently went upstairs. As soon as reaching his room, he slammed the door and flopped onto his bed, burying his face in his pillow. After a bit, he got back up. A letter from Mr. Moscheles sat at his desk. Felix opened it to learn that Ignaz was in Hamburg, visiting Charlotte's relatives. In wanting him to come to Berlin, Felix wrote a begging reply. Berlin, August 10th, 1832. Dear Moscheles, now look here, since I have your letter from Hamburg, I am doubly convinced that come you must. Were it but to spend a few days with us here, nowhere else shall you be permitted to take up your quarters than in Greenscore Hotel, Leipziger Strasse No. 3, that is to say, my room. It faces the street, but is very quiet and pleasant, and as large as your whole house on Norton Street, and the bedroom next to it is of the same size. I shall move a story higher, where another room could be cleared for servants or anyone you choose to bring. A piano awaits you. The stove acts well. In short, you see, I am cut out for a house agent. I really do not exaggerate. You should be comfortable in quarter, and all would be well. Much obliged, but I am not composing at all, and am living much as an asparagus does. I am very comfortable doing nothing. When you come, I shall feel quite ashamed at not having anything new to show you. Yours, Felix. A servant entered his room with a small note. Felix folded his letter and traded it for the note. He looked at it. Felix, time to go. Abraham. Felix rolled his eyes. It was common to send short notes, even if in the same household, as to not shout through the home. Felix threw a suitcase together and went downstairs. His outfit was casual, nothing formal. Abraham noticed and took Felix back upstairs to choose a better outfit. Felix sighed as his father gave him a better black coat. Upon putting it on, it gave him a more shapely figure. Abraham completed the outfit by straightening a nice maroon cravat to make a more pleasing appearance. He then sent him off by carriage to the Summers estate. Felix wasn't happy, as he didn't want to attract the likes of Lorianne. When arriving to the large mansion, Herr and Frau Sommer greeted him in all joy. Felix had expected other guests to show up, but it was only he and the family. They seemed overly polished and polite, as many young gentlemen had walked through the doors for dinner, only to leave in haste. Yet the Summers changed their tactics by inviting Felix to spend the night, so it would be rude if he left early. Upon hearing the chatter in the main hall, a young, excited girl with pinned-up blonde hair and brown eyes rushed in. Her facial complexion wasn't unkempt or anything, just not all that attractive. Her overbearing attitude matched her figure, robust and tall. In an instant she stood beside Felix and took his arm. "I shall escort you to dinner." Felix already felt reluctance to go through with this day, but there was no possible way out. Lorianne sat Felix next to her at the table. His chair was situated rather close. She gave him no chance to give the gentlemanly gesture of helping her get seated. It made him feel a lack of etiquette. As a decent dinner of roasted chicken was served and eaten, Lorianne did most of the talking. Her parents were happy as Felix forced himself to listen and answer her questions. In honesty, they had nothing in common. When dinner neared done, Herr Sommer suggested, "Why don't you two go for a stroll in the atrium? I have many flowers there." "Good idea." Lorianne took Felix by the arm. Felix was still chewing chicken as she pulled him down the hall towards the indoor garden. Once they came to a hall of budding flowers, green leaves, and ivy crawling up the walls. Lorianne gave way to relief. "At last we are alone." She guided Felix to a bench made of stone, carved in the style of Greek art. As she held his hands, Felix hoped the evening would end as soon as possible. He didn't make conversation, causing Lorianne to sigh. "You are so quiet. Have you anything to bring up? I feel as I've been talking to myself all evening. 9. I've nothing new in my life, Felix kept reserved. Lorianne knew he wasn't fond of her, but she didn't want another man to slip away. Her demeanor changed as she commented, in a light tone, "How smart it was of you to choose a maroon cravat. Maroon is my favorite color." "Oh, nice." Felix knew Abraham purposely chose that color. Lorianne then gazed upon his coat. "The coat goes so nicely with it." "Please, 9, Felix retorted as her hands fell to his waist. To his dismay, she leaned her face towards his. Felix leaned back to avoid her incoming kiss, so much so that he fell backwards off the bench. In an instant, he stood back up. "It is late. I shall retire to my guest room." "I'm sorry." Lorianne stayed seated as tears of regret fell from her eyes. Felix left in embarrassment. There was no possible way he could be in love with that woman. He went to his guest room, being sure to lock the door. The next morning at breakfast, Felix nor Lorianne spoke. Felix ate his blueberry sauce toast in silence. Lorianne took small bites of strawberries, both glaring at him. Herr and Frau Sommer could sense the two found no likeness in each other. When Felix returned home, he threw his coat off in a huff. The servant took his hat in the least. Abraham walked by, noticing Felix's mood. He asked in suspicion, "How was it?" "Do you really want to know?" Felix snorted in irritability. Abraham gave a stern glare. "You did not ruin the visit, did you?" "It wasn't me who soured it. I cannot love a woman who has not a thing in common with me. She didn't truly care about me. All she noticed was my figure." "I'm sure if you had put effort in, she would have noticed more." Felix attested, "So it's normal that a lady should try to force a kiss on the first meeting. I found it quite offensive. I cannot love her." Abraham gave a sigh and let his son leave. He did feel disappointment that Lorianne had the audacity to rush at Felix. At least Abraham knew that when his son found someone, she would be true and beautiful. A few days later, Mr. Moscheles came to the home after complying to Felix's request. Felix had done up his room to make it suitable for Ignaz, as he wanted the best for Mr. Moscheles. For himself, he moved to a temporary room on the 3rd floor. Once Ignaz settled his things, he and Felix went to the music room. They shared in improvising and catching up. Ignaz had news and could not contain his excitement. "Charlotte and I are to have another child due next year. We are going to move to a new home to support our growing family." "Wunderbar. What names are you deciding?" "I'll write to you when the child is born. Right now it's a secret. Yet we don't know if it's a boy or girl, so that is part of it as well." Ignaz gave Felix some suspense. Felix then asked, "So where is this new home going to be?" "It's called Chester Place. Still in London, of course." "I can't wait to see it. Hopefully next time I'll meet the new little Moscheles." Felix expressed his excitement by playing a flurry of notes at the keys. Ignaz asked, "Have you anything new and exciting? I know you wrote saying you've composed nothing new, but you should have something to speak of." "Well, I have been trying to get Zelter's position at the Academy. It isn't decided who is to take it. There is much gossip over the ordeal, as the directors are deciding between Karl Rugenhagen or I. I thought I had a good chance, but Karl is older and already deputy director. If I had made it back in time before Zelter's death, I'm sure he would have helped me get the job." Felix sighed. "Don't fuss too much if you don't get it. When something doesn't work out, something twice as good comes around," Ignaz assured. Felix smiled at his positivity. They then continued their impromptu duet. After a week-long stay, Moscheles left Berlin. Once he was gone, the upcoming months of winter were cold and dreary. Felix scarcely went out of the house. He took the horse for a snowy trot on occasion, but not much else. No word from the Academy was affirmed. It made Felix feel a sense of nothingness. He didn't bother composing, but rather revised a thing or two or played piano. In most of his time he lazed about, sleeping and eating. Life seemed to be at a halt for the winter season. Berlin, February 27th, 1833. Dear Moscheles, here they are, wind instruments and fiddles, for the sun and air must not be kept waiting until I come. He must have a cradle song with drums and trumpets and janissary music. Fiddles alone are not nearly lively enough. May every happiness and joy and blessing attend the little stranger. So he is to be called Felix, is he? How nice and kind of you to make him my godchild and former. The first present his godfather makes him is the above entire orchestra. It is to accompany him throughout his life. Dear me, but I am ever so happy when I think of your happiness, and of the time when I shall have my full share of it. By the end of April, at the latest, I intend to be in London, and there we will duly name the boy, and introduce him to the world at large. It will be grand. Ever yours, Felix Mendelssohn Bartholdy. Felix finished up the doodle he felt inclined to sketch upon being informed of the birth of Ignaz and Charlotte's new baby, Felix Moscheles. It moved Felix with happiness that they had named the child after him. The honor made him feel the responsibility to get to know and help the child in any way he could. Abraham walked into the drawing room to find Felix at the writing desk. He looked over his son's shoulder. That's quite the silly little sketch. It's for little Felix Moscheles. I'm going to put together an album of sketches for him. It will be his first present from me. I also intend to pen a little cradle song for him. I'll work it out as Klingman will give me some poetry when I see him in London. When do you intend to be in London? April, Felix gave a quick answer. Abraham stood beside Felix, quiet for a minute, then informed. I was thinking that I may join you. I'd much like to see this smoky nest you ever so love. Oh. Felix didn't know how he felt about his father's idea. It could easily turn into a disaster if Abraham pressured him or quarreled. Many scenarios ran through his mind, but contrary to his thoughts, Felix casually smiled and nodded. As the month of March leaped by, the board of council at the Sing Academy made their choice of director. It was Herr Rogenhagen. The outcome gave way to gossip among society. Once again, Felix was sick of Berlin. The longer he lingered in the city, the more it made him miss Rietz and Zelter. He was now 24, and it was hard to fathom that Rietz had been gone a year. One temporary escape from the city was a music festival in Dusseldorf. The committee organizing it wanted Felix to conduct. It was deemed to be an important engagement as the city happened to be looking for a music director. Conducting the festival would give a good chance of obtaining the job. Abraham felt happy in seeing his son willing to travel to find a position. When Felix arrived by carriage to Dusseldorf, he found the place intriguing. The concert house seemed decent enough. Members of the festival committee gladly welcomed him, and rehearsals commenced. Though the committee deemed kind, Felix couldn't help but notice a few members of the orchestra glaring at him. Their irritation worsened as Felix stepped before them with his baton. These musicians were not used to the modern conducting methods. Felix continued on, and the given music was played capitally. The program contained an assortment of compositions, new, old, and sacred works. When everything was performed as intended, everyone nodded in satisfaction. The committee, meanwhile, whispered amongst themselves of this talented young man. One of them put together a contract of terms to discuss after the evening's festival. They were determined to hire Felix in the soon future. An hour before the concert, the orchestra took a rest. Felix decided to take a stroll around the concert house to get fresh air. He exited through a back door that led to a quiet alley. The wind gave a chill, but it cooled him down. He walked in his lonesome, thinking to himself. His thoughts were halted as he neared the front of the building. There he noticed an eager audience streaming in the doors early. It made him happy that there was to be a good turnout. Yet in a sudden moment, a cluster of people stormed towards the concert house in the most disruptive manner. A few officers on guard blocked them as their demeanor appeared rather violent. Felix stood where he was, still close to the alley, watching such a commotion. A moment later, a hand fell on his shoulder. Felix turned to see a member of the committee. He seemed worried as he guided Felix towards the back of the building. The concert is to start soon. I don't want you to be late. What are those people so angry over? Felix questioned, trying to catch a glimpse. As they were still in earshot from the quarrel, a man among the group snapped, Get a different conductor, or I shall go in and remove him myself. Felix instantly tried to turn back as the quarrel concerned him. The committee member stopped him by clenching his arm. He warned, You do not want near that quarrel. I'm making sure you get back inside safe and sound. There is much prejudice in this city. Oh, Felix gave a sigh. When they returned, the orchestra was settled on stage already. Felix grabbed his baton and joined them. The audience clapped to welcome him despite the commotion that happened outside. It helped Felix calm down from any worries. He turned to the orchestra and continued into the first piece. Everything went smoothly. After a grand finish of a symphony, the concert completed successfully. Felix and the orchestra took their bows, then dispersed. The sound of soothing chatter echoed through the auditorium of a content audience. Felix packed his music, smiling at the results. Once he went backstage, he found the committee members standing together. One handed him a contract explaining, "Take this. Read it over and give us your answer by the autumn season." Danke, Felix's smile only grew. The paper contained their terms of agreement for the position of director. He carefully put the contract in his portfolio. Though there was time to think about it, he knew what his answer would be. April couldn't have arrived soon enough. Felix packed his luggage and headed downstairs, where Abraham had his luggage packed as well. The rest of the family gathered to give their goodbyes. After hugs and kisses were given, father and son set off, London bound. Once they were on their way, Felix felt a sense of contentment to have his father along. It helped ease any homesickness. The first stop after a long carriage ride was Hamburg. Abraham shuddered a bit when entering the city he had run away from all those years ago. Felix noticed him stare at the old family home that still sat on the corner. The carriage stopped at an inn, brushing away Abraham's thoughts. After they purchased a room for the evening, Abraham suggested to Felix, "We should eat in the tavern, have a few drinks, and play cards. I brought my deck." "All right," Felix felt surprise at his father's sudden inclination to play games. They went downstairs and ate a decent meal. Abraham then ordered he and Felix a few glasses of beer. Felix shuffled the card deck and set up a game. They had a good couple of bonding hours. The next day, Felix and Abraham boarded the early morning steamer for London. Abraham had no trouble with seasickness, but was astonished at how ill Felix became. It confused him, as he had taken Felix and Rebecca on a sea voyage in their childhood, rendering fine then. It struck him odd that Felix developed such a violent seasickness. When the days on the water passed, the two travelers arrived at the London scene. Abraham stuck close to Felix, as he knew nothing of the vast world of smog. Felix held to Ignaz's letter of address. "We must find Chester Place. I believe if we find a cab on that street there, we shall find it." "I'm just following you." Abraham looked all around him, distracted at all of the commotion in London. Felix called to a station carriage, with the driver waiting for a customer. He showed the coachman the address. As they hopped on the coach, a voice called their way. "Hello, Herr Mendelssohn." Klingman jumped onto the carriage, joining them. Felix quickly explained to Karl, "We must write a lead. I must have a cradle song for little Mochelles." Felix grabbed some manuscript paper. "You pen the music first, then I'll make some verses." Klingman watched Felix jot down notes. The music had been in his head for quite some time. When he finished a page-long piece, Klingman wrote his verses, then signed the corner of the page. The carriage stopped at a street of complexes as soon as the lead was complete. Felix put it with the book of sketches. Before walking to Chester Place, Felix stopped across the street from the building. "You two go ahead. I must make one more sketch to present to little Felix." "All right, don't be too long." Klingman gestured to Abraham to follow him. Felix dug out the sketchbook once more and began drawing Chester Place. It looked like a humble and happy home. As he finished the final touches of the sketch, Ignaz came to the balcony of his flat and called, "I'm waiting for you, dear Felix." "Coming." Felix raced towards the home. Ignaz greeted him at the stairwell. He guided Felix inside the flat where Charlotte sat in the parlor, holding the new child. Felix's eyes gleamed at seeing the cute face of the baby. Their eldest child, Emily, who was 6 years of age, sat next to Charlotte, admiring her little brother. Felix grabbed the sketchbook and handed it to Emily. "This is for little Felix. There are sketches and autographs for you all to enjoy. There's blank pages if Felix takes up sketching later." "Thank you." She skimmed the already made sketches. Felix took the page of the cradle song and handed it to Ignaz. "Klingman and I composed this together. Be sure to play it." "I will." Ignaz took it. Klingman then told Ignaz, "Go get Felix the thing you got him." "Oh yeah." Ignaz raced to the room nearby and was heard rummaging a drawer. He came back with something unique. It appeared to be a thick ribbon. Ignaz explained, "It's a new fashion of cravat. Very English." "Danke." Felix took it. Abraham looked at it and noticed Klingman wearing one of the same fashion. It looked nice. Felix folded the fine fabric to try it later. Charlotte then gestured to Felix to sit beside her. As soon as he sat, she handed him the baby. "Thank you. My arms are tired today." She got up to do some things. "Isn't he the dearest little thing?" Felix smiled as little Mochelles opened his eyes. After looking around a while, the baby closed his eyes again, and a slight smile grew on his little face. He was content. Abraham sat beside Felix to see the baby as Ignaz took a chair nearby. He told Felix, "I have some concerts arranged for us in your time here." "Excellent," Felix nodded, rocking the baby. Charlotte came back to the parlor and took the child back. Felix let her sit in his spot. Young Emily went to the piano and begged her father, "Can you play the piece Felix composed? Carl should sing it." "All right, we can try it. You're always so eager to hear new music." Ignaz sat at the piano bench, next to his daughter. He then paused as an idea came to him. Turning to Felix, he suggested in excitement, "May I try this accompaniment on guitar? It seems to suit. I have my father's instrument." "Of course," Felix assured in deep interest. Ignaz left the room, coming back with a nice mahogany guitar. He sat in a chair with a footrest nearby. Once he was situated, Carl stood next to the music stand to catch a glimpse at the sheet music. Felix felt excited as the baby would get to hear his present. Ignaz began the on-the-spot guitar arrangement with the bright and clear chords. They rang out like the chipper chiming of a glockenspiel. Klingman gave a breath while reading the music, making a humble entry with his tenor voice. He sang his lyrics of slumber and dreaming. The pitch of his voice had a rustic feel, making the melody as a calming lullaby. Charlotte smiled while rocking her baby along with the rhythm. Little Felix Moscheles appeared to be dreaming along to the music composed just for him. Felix Sr. gazed at the child, then at Ignaz, ever so happy that the piece worked out. Carl's words and song told the child to dream of joy and sorrow, the people he would come to love, however many came and went, to be patient as there was always new friends to follow. Each verse had an air to be said by the cradle of an infant who had yet to experience the world. Klingman then joyfully sang a section containing a sweet and succulent melody that could bloom any flower. He let his words flow, letting his feelings give ease to do it. The guitar then led the voice into the words of being patient in almost an ear-tickling giggle. The repetition of telling their new little friend to be patient would in hopes remind him to be as so. After the first line of verses, Klingman looked to Ignaz, who gave a nod. Carl paused the next line as Ignaz improvised a solo. It galloped gracefully like a harp. It then melodied its way to a cadence, where Carl entered with the next set of verses, his voice smooth as butter. Though the music went on in pleasure, near the end, little Moscheles began to cry. It was a hard cry of an upset child. Klingman and Ignaz finished up the best they could. Carl then teased Felix. "Good job, your music makes babies cry." "I tried to make it cheerful." Felix personally felt bad. Charlotte assured, "The music is fine. I think Felix is just hungry." She got up and took her child to the nursery. The others continued playing music, switching to the piano. Abraham had much pleasure in listening to Felix and Ignaz play the music of Bach together. They could do anything they wished at the keys, improvising based on written music or from their own imaginations. The sight of Abraham sitting on the sofa, leaning against the armrest with the expression of pure content burned into Felix's memory. He couldn't help but feel joy in the fact that his father seemed so happy in the moment. It was a feeling not felt from him in a great while. The next day, Felix got dressed, but took longer than usual. He stood in front of the mirror, with every article of clothing except for his cravat. The ribbon was tangled in his hands as he could not figure out how to tie it. Each time he tried, it looked crooked or not right. He felt too embarrassed in the moment to ask. After practicing a few times in the mirror, he gave it up for the time being. It was a beautiful piece of clothing, but decided not to stress too much over figuring it out. The day would be spent mostly at Chester Place, so he tied the cravat he usually wore. Klingman had work to tend to, and Ignaz had students of piano around town to teach. Abraham was tired from traveling, so spent the day napping. Felix decided to use his day by helping Charlotte around the house with the children. She seemed in a busy state with the new child, so Felix entertained Emily by giving her piano lessons and sketching. When Charlotte needed a rest from holding little Mochelles, Felix held him to let Charlotte retire for a nap. The baby slept most of the time. Felix enjoyed humming to him as it seemed to keep the child calm. The day made Felix give way to some thoughts if this was what it would be like if he had a family and children of his own. Abraham quietly peeked out of the guest room and watched how well Felix was around the children. He noticed the sense of happiness his son had. It gave him hope that this experience would drive his son to make a family. Abraham entered the room to Felix smiling at the infant. He commented, "Having fun?" "Oh." Felix looked up. "Yeah." Abraham smiled, then headed out to roam the city. He wanted to develop his own taste for London society. Having been to Paris and Switzerland multiple times, he was no beginner at being on his own for a while. In the month, Felix and Ignaz's concert engagements commenced. Though Felix thought his Italian symphony still needed revising, he prepared a rendition to be performed. He continued consulting Fanny over the matter by letter, but she assured the first draft to be the best. In any means, London went crazy over it. Abraham decided to attend these concerts. It felt interesting, as in the past when Felix traveled with him. It was banking business. This time Abraham was going along with Felix to musical business. When he watched his son play and conduct, he felt a sense of pride. The London audiences greeted him with whole hearts. Felix and Abraham's relationship grew over the course of their London trip together. They had become the best of adult travel partners as the summer season went on. Abraham seemed less anxious of Felix's outlook after seeing the success of London. Felix in turn began understanding his father better. Yet happy times, too good to be true, had interruptions eventually. As they took a carriage for a visit to Portsmouth dockyard, they admired the large ships coming in. When the carriage parked, Felix hopped off. Abraham stood to step off. As he did, the horse buckled, jolting the carriage. Abraham tripped as he lost balance. He landed hard on the cobblestone. Upon the fall, Abraham's shout echoed across the harbor. "Damn it!" As well as a handful of other words that Felix did not ever think was in his father's vocabulary. "I think I broke my leg, or my arm," Abraham cried. Felix and the coachman managed to help him stand. He was able to put weight on his leg. It wasn't broken. As Felix took his arm to help him back in the carriage, Abraham yelled some, but managed to sit back in. Felix told him, "I think you might have hurt your arm more than your leg. If your leg were broken, you wouldn't have been able to get up." "How would you know?" Abraham was in a mood. He clutched his upper arm as if his shoulder were hurting him. Felix stated, "Let's go back to Ignaz's home. He has a nice room where you can rest and get a doctor. When I fell out of a carriage, it took months, as you know." Felix then teased, "Yet it may take longer for you since you're old." "I'm 57. I'm not old. Since when did you go to medical school?" Abraham sneered in his frustration. The carriage headed out of the docks and back to Chester Place. Ignaz came out of the complex, as he happened to notice Felix and the coachman helping Abraham out of the carriage. He had a wave of worry and asked, "What happened?" "He tripped. His ankle is only sprained, I think, but his shoulder is what I am worried about," Felix stated. "I'll go get a doctor." Ignaz sprinted off. Once they got up the stairs and in the house, Abraham felt much disappointment as he limped to bed. Charlotte gave way to worry upon seeing him. Little Mochelles was crying in all the commotion. Felix went to Charlotte and assured, "Everything will be all right. My father got in an accident. Sorry for the sudden hassle. I shall repay you for any extra stay we may need." "You are fine, dear Felix. Things happen, as you know." She alluded to Felix's past incident. She then added, "Plus you help me much with the children." Felix gave sighs of relief as the baby quieted when things calmed down. He went to the guest room to find Abraham resting. Ignaz soon came back with the doctor following close behind. Straightway the doctor tended to Abraham, then informed, "Your leg has a few bruises, but nothing terrible. On the other hand, I'm afraid you broke your collarbone. I shall wrap your arm in a splint, but it will take much time to heal." "When would I be able to travel?" "I'd give at least a week and a half before going anywhere. Be very careful when you do go. I do believe you'll heal best after getting home, but right now you need to stay. The doctor wrapped his arm and shoulder, then went on his way. The next days at Chester Place were spent in a rather calm sense. Charlotte tended to her needlework, while little Moscheles was next to her in the crib. Emily played with some wooden farm animals. Felix and Ignaz had moved a clavier in the guest room so they could practice and play music to entertain Abraham, as he was in bed rest. He enjoyed it much, as Felix studied a collection of Bach's fugues and arranged some of Moscheles' music. Ignaz did much composing. It was interesting to hear his creativity in its purest form. The visit to London was deemed to a close after another week passed. Abraham was fit to travel home. When giving the Moscheles family their farewells on the 29th of August, Felix grabbed a score from his satchel and handed it to Ignaz. "This is the score to my Hebrides overture. I want it kept in safe hands. Take it, please." "Felix, are you sure?" Ignaz was astounded. Felix nodded, and Ignaz accepted it. They then parted outside of Chester Place. A carriage waited across the street and took Felix and Abraham to the docks. Felix worked on editing the Italian symphony while in the cab. Abraham had an ache in his collarbone, so Felix set the music down and adjusted the cloth splint for him. "I think I will miss London," Abraham commented. "We should definitely come back together. Hopefully none of us will be falling out of carriages next time." Felix gazed out the window to catch the last glimpse of the smoky streets. When the carriage arrived and parked near the docks, Felix and Abraham stepped out carefully. They then boarded the nearest boat due to Hamburg. It departed within minutes. An old gentleman walking the London docks went to the carriage Felix and Abraham had exited. He gave the coachman a note of address and climbed in the cab. Upon doing so, he found a bound stack of manuscripts on the seat. He mumbled to himself, "What is this garbage?" He looked at it in confusion, unable to make out the massive and complex scoring of music. Before wasting another minute, he threw it out, and the cab continued on. As the carriage drove off, there on the dirty grounds of London lay the scoring of Mendelssohn's Italian Symphony.